A person wearing a red jacket and pink hat stands on an elevated platform on the left. Another person wearing a tan hat stands at a microphone on a small stage. Several audience members sit facing the stage in what appears to be an indoor venue.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good. Welcome to Core of Discovery 2 and the Tent of Many Voices. We're a traveling exhibit, been traveling for over 2 years, have another year to go. We'll finish up in 2006, September 2006, so we have a full year. And when we started over 2 years ago in Monticello, Virginia, one of our first presenters was Mr. Chief Snider. He's here with you today. He's here from the Chinook tribe. He's the honorary chief of the Chinook peoples from the mouth of the Columbia River. So let's give him a nice warm welcome.
Nice introduction. Kahalia, everyone. As he said, I am the fourth great grandson of Chief Concomly, who met Lewis and Clark at the mouth of the Columbia in 1805. I was going to ask this question. I thought I was going to be talking to third graders, but you guys look like you're about juniors from Kendrick High. Is that correct? Okay, I'm all right on.
A person wearing a red jacket with geometric patterns, beaded necklaces, and a red cap stands against a gray wall. A white flag with blue and yellow sections is visible on the right side of the frame.
There. I went out and checked the buses to see where you guys were from. So I'm not too familiar with this area, but it's wonderful to see you. We're here to actually celebrate the survival of the Indian tribes on the trail, and we're here to commemorate Lewis and Clark on their expedition. I had to be part of that in Lewiston about 4 or 5 years ago, when people kept saying, we're going to celebrate Lewis and Clark, we're going to celebrate this and that. And I took offense to that and said, well, I think you want to use another word, because the Indians are not going to celebrate the loss of their land and the loss of their country and the loss of their culture. And so what happened at that very meeting, they decided to include all unrecognized tribes on the trail. At that time they had about 15 tribes, and they went on, and then right now we're over 60 tribes on the trail, recognized or not by the United States government. But don't get me wrong, we Indians who are not recognized, like the Monicans at the beginning of the trail, the Chinooks at the end of the trail, we still recognize the United States government. So I don't want that to be confused. Now I wanted to ask you, how many of you people have Indian blood? 1, 2, 3, 4. I've talked to some schools where almost 80% of the people, of the kids, thought they had Indian blood, but they didn't know how much, they didn't know what kind, what tribe they belonged to, or anything else. So I always encourage you, if you do have some Indian blood, because of college scholarships, money and things that might be available to you, to find out what your ancestry is and be very proud of your heritage. When I was growing up, my mother told me, don't tell anybody you're part Indian because of discrimination. Other people have that same problem in America today. We think we're perfect, but we're not. So as I grew up, I started catching passes at Oregon State University. I was floating feather, and I was the only one on the stage that wasn't white. I was the only Indian. We didn't have the black people playing football at that time. And so I was kind of an oddity. But I want to tell you something now. After working with the Circle of Tribal Advisors nationally, working with Maya Lin out of New York on the Confluence projects, and visiting schools, visiting teachers.
A person stands against a gray background, wearing a red cap, a red beaded vest with geometric patterns, and blue jeans. They hold feathers in one hand and wear beaded necklaces.
And everything else, being part Indian is a plus. Not to say that if you're not Indian, you shouldn't be proud of your heritage. If you're Swede, go for it. I always say that. Okay, I just wonder, you know, in your school, have you kids been studying anything about Lewis and Clark? If you have, raise your hands. A couple of you, or some of you. So you know the whole story, so probably I'm just up here for nothing today. But I want to tell you some of the Indian story. How many of you know how to speak some Chinook language or some Indian language? You know Indian words? Well, let me tell you how to say a couple words. By the way, I want to recognize one of my great friends, Rocky Rockwell. He's also known as Captain Clark. Really a lieutenant, but we'll call him Captain Clark. Anyway, I'm going to do this in 3 syllables for you.
A person wearing a red cap and a red beaded jacket stands holding a white cloth or banner near a blue cylindrical object on a small stage. Studio lighting and equipment are visible in the background.
The first one is Kla, second one is How, the third one is Ya. And it goes Kla, How, Ya. That means in Chinook language, hello or goodbye, much like aloha is in Hawaii, hello, goodbye. It's just a greeting that you do. On 3, 1, 2, 3. Kla, How, Ya. Say it again. Kla, How, Ya. Whenever you see me on the road, wandering around your bus or anything, say, Klahowya, Chief. I know what you're talking about. Okay, in the old days, we had a situation where President Jefferson wanted to explore the West. He thought it might be good to explore the Missouri River and see if it went all the way across America. And any of the tributaries, and what I think we was interested in was having some commerce. But the thing that happened is that he'd never been on the other side of Allegheny Mountains. We had trappers back here, and mostly French and so forth, that were wandering around some of these tribes, but he hadn't been there at all. So he got Lewis and Clark, and they got 31 men or whatever, and they decided to go across the country and see if they could find a passageway, mainly for commerce, or get the land, so to speak. So he was making a deal with some people in Europe. Any of you know who we bought the Louisiana Purchase from? Anybody know? He knows? We bought it from the French. You can imagine it all started. A guy named Napoleon Bonaparte. You ever heard of him? About 18 cents per square mile. He didn't know how, Jefferson didn't know what he was buying. He didn't know how many trees, who was out there. He knew there were some Indians because the Monacan Nation was only 40 miles away. He knew there were Indians out there, but he didn't know whether they're going to be friendly or not. By listening to trappers, he felt that they were going to be okay and that they would let him through. Well, after they bought the Louisiana Purchase, they doubled the size of America. And did you know at that time there were more Indians living?
A person wearing a red cap and a red jacket with geometric patterns and beaded decorations stands against a gray background, holding what appears to be a feathered object in one hand.
On the west, then there were white men living on the Atlantic coast. Can you imagine that? They're more of a population. Of course, they've only been there for 10,000 years that everybody knows about. They didn't come from any place. Great Spirit, the Creator, put them there at the beginning of time. The mountains and the valleys, plants and the animals, and the life-giving rivers. No matter what religion you belong to or which one you pray for. I use the word Creator. That encompasses anybody.
A person wearing a red cap and red jacket with geometric patterns in yellow, green, and blue stands against a plain gray background. They wear beaded necklaces and hold what appears to be a feathered object in their left hand while gesturing.
That's higher than all of us, or the Great Spirit. So in saying, I might use that term throughout my discourse. Well, they finally got that sold and bought, and so he's added on the Louisiana Purchase. Well, let's start out. Well, can't go because it's not finalized yet. And the Spanish and the French aren't going to let you through. So they started at Wood River, and then when everything got done, they went into St. Louis, and then on the way. And my text today is, how were they treated by the Indians? And what part did the Indians play in their...
A person wearing a red cap and a red shirt with geometric patterns stands against a plain gray background, holding what appears to be a small white object or document in their hands.
Journey across America. And they hadn't hardly got out, and they ran into the Kickapoos. Most of you remember the Kickapoo Joy Juice, whatever that was in that comic strip. Maybe you don't, but I know you do. Anyway, Kickapoo Joy Juice, they traded some supplies with them. Begin the trading already for 3 deer. And then they moved on. But, as she mentioned in the last one, they started running into some Indians that weren't quite so friendly. Shawnees were friendly. They let them through. But we got to the Yankton Sioux. The Yankton Sioux, they greeted them, came out, wanted to carry.
A person in a red cap and red jacket with geometric patterns stands in profile against a plain background, raising one hand in a waving gesture.
Came up into the village on a carrier with skins, and of course they'd seen some Frenchmen up this time, so everything was great. And they were getting along fine. They wanted to tell them about the great white father back there who now owned the land. And I'm not going to get into that, but they didn't understand that at all. This was their land. It wasn't really their land. They belonged to the land. The land was not owned by anyone. So that was fine. They partied and said, hey, these Indians are okay. We're going to make it fine. Well, they moved on a little further, and I ran into Black Buffalo of the Teton Sioux, and he wasn't going to let them through. That's his river, that's his tribe's place, and he's not going to let anybody through there unless he wanted, and then he wanted everything from them. He wanted cigarettes, he wanted liquor, he wanted everything else they had to trade, and so they finally got...
A person wearing a red cap and a red jacket with geometric patterns stands against a gray background, gesturing with their hands while speaking. They wear beaded necklaces and hold what appears to a stick or staff.
Got held up, and as she mentioned last class, there was a confrontation. And it got down to the place where they were hanging on to the rope on the boat, and they weren't going to let them go on the keel boat. And Clark, he started to draw his sword. And they had their guns up on the ship, starting to train. And these Indians, after a lot of 2 or 3 different kinds of scuffles, they wanted to let their women come aboard and see what the keel boat was like. And they wanted to spend the night on the boat. Well, finally, they got through all that. Nobody got killed. Nobody got injured. So what happened then? They just...
A person wearing a red cap and a red jacket with colorful beaded and embroidered designs stands against a neutral background, holding what appears to be a small decorated object or craft item in their hand.
Let them go on. There's no toll fee. They thought maybe that anybody coming down their river is going to have to pay. That was their river, and nobody else could go unless they said so. So, wow, we got through that mess. And on down the river to other tribes that they met. There were over 60 tribes kind of on the trail. I think it was 58 in my recollection. And they got to the Mandan village. I'm just hitting the high spots for you now because there are other little tribes along the way. But the Mandans was a very harsh winter. The snow was...
A person wearing a red cap and red jacket with geometric patterns and beaded details stands against a gray background, holding what appears to be a white object in their hands.
Clear up to here. It was freezing. They'd built their fort over here. The Mandans were over here. They're also the Rickaras and the Hidatsus, and they're all one big family. And those 3 tribes were looking for buffalo, and there's none to be found. So they had a big buffalo dance. And the Corps decided to pitch right in with them. They got in on the dancing. And they were out there, some of these Indians didn't have shoes, and their snow clear up their knees. But finally they did find some buffalo. They did survive that harsh winter, and it was the longest that they'd stayed in any one spot up to that point. And it turned out it was one of the 2 longest stays they had on the whole trip, the other being at Fort Clatsop at the end of the trail. Well, there was Sacagawea, there was Sacagawea, and it depends on who you're talking to, how you want to pronounce it. I always said Sacagawea because in Oregon and Washington we have statues and it's a J. Then I go back and I talk to Amy Mossett of the Mandans, and she'll say it's with a G. It's Sacagawea, not Sacagawea. So, like she said in her...
A person wearing a red cap and a red beaded jacket holds a feathered object in their raised hand. They are smiling and facing toward the right side of the frame against a plain gray background.
Last performance, if I say it one way one time and I say it another way next time, you'll have to excuse me because I've been using both on the trail. The most famous woman in American history. There are more statues of Sacagawea than any other woman in American history. One of the most famous women in all the world. And here's a young teenage girl with a baby pomp, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, and the dad, taken along as guides and interpreters. Well, they made it through that winter, thank God. They got to there, the Mandans told them, okay, you're going down the road, the river's going to do this, the river's going to do that. One of these days you're going to run into this big, hurtling waterfalls. And they're probably talking about Great Falls as we know it today. It's changed a lot since those days. Well, that's okay. We'll get around the falls in a couple of days and be on our way. That was about 3 weeks. I've been there. I know what it's like. I went up to the buffalo jump, where they ran the buffaloes off the hill, and...
A person wearing a red cap and a red shirt with geometric patterns and beaded necklaces looks downward against a plain gray background.
And the buffalo would die and they'd go down and they'd pick them up that way, so they just would herd them out over the sink. And the gummy substance on the ground is so sticky that when you pick your feet up, you got about that much mud on the bottom of your shoe. And they had storms and the rivulets, and they almost got drowned in a couple of them. But that was the home of the Grovants and the Assiniboines, some of those.
A person wearing a red cap with decorative designs and a red shirt with geometric patterns speaks while facing slightly to the right against a plain gray background.
And back and forth, they finally discovered their way, and they gave them directions. All this time when we're making our move, we're getting directions from the Indians. Sacagawea is trying to interpret. The Frenchmen are trying to interpret because there have been some French trappers in there. Some of these Indians have never seen a white person. Some of these Indians had seen a couple. There were a couple that had married Indians and were living there and were used as interpreters to help them guide their way. Because they didn't know where that Missouri was going. And finally they did.
A person wearing a red cap and a red shirt with geometric patterns in yellow and green sits against a plain gray background. They wear multiple beaded necklaces and have long hair.
They kept going and going, and they got into a country where the Missouri just petered out. And this, on the way up, they didn't know whether to go this river or that river or follow it this way. And they finally picked the right direction. They got down there, and so, wait a minute, you see a couple Indians out here. They see us. They run back to camp. They're scared, but we finally get into camp, did some trading, proved that they were friends. And who is there but
a person wearing a red cap and a red shirt with geometric patterns in yellow, orange, and green stands against a plain gray background. They wear beaded necklaces and a circular medallion pendant.
Kamiaway. Kamiaway was Sacagawea's brother. So they're talking brother sister, and her sister also was there. And Sacagawea, remember, was captured by the Hidatsas earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier, and some of her relatives had been killed in that capture. And so she'd come back, and now she's okay. And they decided to, because they were friends, Sacagawea decided to keep on going with them, and so they went on. They were heading for what? They're heading for the Bitterroot Mountains, and they had to get across. I was talking to Kevin the other day. He says he's gone over.
A person wearing a red cap and a red jacket with geometric patterns and beaded necklaces stands against a plain background, adjusting their cap with one hand while holding something white in the other.
With a helicopter, he says they took the only route that was available. By helicopter, looking down on it and getting to the mountains and getting to this place right here, it's the only way through the Lolo Pass that they could have made it. And they had guides to help them. And there they were on top of the mountains with snow. They had to kill their horses to have something to eat. There was no food. And so they finally made it over to Waipi Perry. And you guys had a big celebration over there yesterday. I wish I could have seen it. And finally into this country here, the Nez Perce. Well, the Nez Perce, hey, look at these guys. What are we going to do?
A person wearing a red cap and a red shirt with geometric patterns in yellow, orange, and green stands against a gray background. They wear beaded necklaces and speak, with their mouth open mid-sentence.
With them. Look at all those goods they have. Well, let's have a council. They had a council and they said, shall we kill them and take all those possessions? They have guns. They have everything. Medicine, everything. And ammunition. Well, there was a lady there named Wat Kuis, who's very famous, and she's in all the history books. And Wat Kuis says, I've been captured like Sacagawea had been, and I've been out living with the whites for a while, and they're good people. Don't kill them, don't take their stuff, but do them no harm. And that's the byword now, the Nez Perce people. When I talk to Otis Half Moon, when I talk to Alan Pinkham, and I talk to Carla High Eagle of the Nez Perce on.
A person wearing a red cap and a red shirt with geometric patterns and beaded necklaces stands against a gray background, holding what appears to be a small object in their hand while speaking.
Some of my ramblings, they say, well, maybe the Nez Perce should have taken everything. America would be quite different today if that had been the case. Anyway, then, what are we going to do? We're down to Clearwater. You finally got across the Bitterroots, down to Clearwater, into the Snake River, and then down to Tri-Cities. And I've just been lucky enough to work with Maya Lin on the Lewis and Clark Trail. Remember, she's the gal that did the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C. And we're doing 7 projects on the rivers, $22 million. In the last 2 years, all I have to do is get up, talk, and we go to places and pick up money. We've picked up $18 million the last 2 years. So when you get to Portland, you folks, you come down for these other events, come look what we're doing on the Lewis and Clark Trail with the confluence here. Well, this is all fine. We got to the mouth of the Snake River now. And who's there? There are Indians there, of course. Well, let's take a little trip up the Columbia. And now we know that we're getting someplace. It's not going to be long before we're going to be down at the mouth of the Columbia. Because they had known that ships had come in. In fact, 28 ships had come into the river already and had been trading with the Chinook Indians at the mouth. But the upriver Chinooks had not seen a white man. They'd heard about it. So they run into the Walla Walla Indians. They danced with the Walla Wallas, had a good time. Saw the Wanapums, the Colvilles, and the Yakimas. Then they came back and said, well, that's not the way to go, but we've met some real friendly Indians. And everybody's got these fish, dried salmon. Oh, We pretty soon, we got something to eat, but we're not too sure that we're going to eat this every day. But do you have some dog? We like the dog better. And so I think Clark, he didn't like the dog too much, but Lewis, he did. But all the guys were just waiting for something to eat, like geese or whatever, beavers, whatever they could find at that point. And they decided to go down the river, and maybe you've heard of the Umatilla, Confederate tribes of the Umatilla were there. And before they got to Salila Falls. And I got 5. Okay, so I'm going to run through this quick. At the mouth there, I saw an Indian with a sailor coat, blue and red sailor jacket. They saw Indians with beads, white man's beads. And so now we're getting close. Then there's Salila Falls. And here are these Indians.
A person wearing a red cap and red shirt with geometric patterns stands against a plain wall, holding beaded necklaces and what appears to be dried plant material or feathers in their hands.
With flat heads. Remember, Indians are not all one big monolithic group. Mandans are 6'5", Gerard Baker. And Tex Hall is 6'7". I say to them, what part of white person are you? We're not white at all. We're full-blooded Indians. And they're that tall. They're seeing a Chinook now that's 5'5", wearing something wood, eating salmon, not chasing buffalo, not riding horses, doing canoes. And these Chinooks see them coming, and they start wringing their hands and crying out loud, saying, we're all going to be killed. Oh, there's Sacagawea, and there's Punk. So if you have a woman and a baby with your war party, it's not a war party. It's a traveling party. So now the Chinooks had discovered Lewis and Clark at this point. As you mentioned, it's just the other way around. We've been here for 10,000 years. And by the way, we did find a basket that was 16,000 years old, made of willow twigs and put together with pine pitch when they were doing the dams in Oregon. 16,000, that's before the Brett's floods. Remember the Brett's floods went over the top of our buildings in Portland. So on down the river. At Salila Falls, they were hoping that when they went through, it was only 40 yards ride from here to that green can up there. And the Indians had been fishing there with dip nets and things like that. So what happened there was that the Indians would hope that these canoes would be turned upside down and they'd go and take whatever lands on the shore. Because Stephen Ambrose, who was one of my friends back east, and when he wrote his book, he said that the Chinook Indians were thieves. Well, not really. Anything left alone was theirs for the taking. Canoes, hatchets, fishing stuff, medicine, whatever. It isn't that they borrowed it, but he liked to say that they were stealing. That isn't the way the Indians felt about it. So on down the river, Vancouver, Washougaluis, Skaloot, Choteaus, and through Vancouver and down to the mouth of the Columbia, the Chinook Indian tribe at the end. My fourth great-grandfather, Chief Concomly. You see his picture in Charles Russell's painting, greeting the Sacagawea, doing hand signals for the Chinooks. And what I'm saying today, I'm giving you the Indian viewpoint, but I'll tell you something.
A person wearing a red jacket with geometric patterns, beaded necklaces, and a red cap stands against a gray background, gesturing while speaking.
There are no words spoken. Sacagawea could not interpret that Chinook guttural language. No way. And so the painting shows them standing up in a canoe, waving at each other. It was stormy, the trees were falling, they had gone back into a niche, and the Chinooks gave them 2 or 3 salmon. And I'm going to skip over some stuff because now they went down to the tree and carved the name of the tree. They went down to the whale and saw where the whale was. Then they came back and they decided where we're going to stay for the winter. And they took a boat York got the boat, Sacagawea got the boat, first ones that time, and decided to stay at Fort Clatsop where there were more elk, and they could see the ships coming in. But I'll leave you with this. While they were there, what a paradox it was, that while they were there, the ship Lydia came into port in Baker's Bay, and the Chinooks told them they had left and gone back. So they missed the bus ride home. So the rest of the story is that, you know what happened? The white man, you mentioned that one man died of appendicitis on the trail. Then there were 3 men who died because they killed 2 Blackfeet Piegan Indians who were stealing their guns and their horses. Then I'm talking to a Blackfoot man in Portland this last year. Not true at all. He says the one that Fields stabbed died. The one that Lewis shot while he was running away recovered and didn't die. So not 1 man died on the trail, not 3 men died on the trail, but 2 men died on the trail. So I'll leave you with that. I say Kopanika Tum Tum from my heart. Posikakwa, so be it. But I want to leave you with this, 7 Chinook directions. Never forget them. There's east and there's west. There's north and there's south. There's up and there's down. And there's a direction of your hearts. Posikakwa. I'm glad you could come.
Thank you, Chief Snider. And thank you for coming. Before we let you take off, at the top of the next hour at 11:30, we will be showing a film, Across the Divide.
A mostly dark screen with horizontal lines of text and interface elements visible at the edges. The image appears heavily degraded or corrupted, with minimal legible content distinguishable against the black background. A person wearing a beaded vest and feathered headdress stands at a wooden podium on a small stage. The background is dark. They appear to be giving a presentation or speech.